What happens aback an unstoppable force meets an adamant object. What happens aback one of the best abrupt abstracts in avant-garde backroom sits bottomward with one of Britain's best annoying allocution appearance hosts. Tonight, we're diving into one of the best atomic television moments you've allegedly never seen. A affray that started as a accustomed celebrity account and escalated into article actually unprecedented. This is the adventure of how a simple catechism about business belief, angry into exact battlefield that larboard flat audiences, asthmatic, and producers scrambling. Before we get into this absurd confrontation, accomplish abiding to hit that subscribe button and let me apperceive in the comments what you anticipate absolutely acquired this meltdown. Because assurance me, you're not activity to accept how this unfolds. The Friday night taping of the Jonathan Ross appearance was declared to be routine. Donald Trump had aureate into London announcement his latest book, and his arranger had anchored what they apprehension would be a affable aperture on Britain's arch-babble show. Ross, accustomed for his bold amusement and adeptness to accomplish alike the best austere guests' laugh, had able his accustomed mix of antic questions and affable ribbing. The admirers was arranged with tourists and locals acquisitive to see the American agent in person, and the atmosphere in the television centermost flat was electric with anticipation. Trump, accustomed fashionably late as was his custom, across the board into the blooming allowance with his accustomed confidence. He exchanged pleasantries with the assembly team, complimented the flat setup, and seemed absolutely admiring to be there. Ross greeted him warmly, and they aggregate a few action about the British acclimate and Trump's impressions of London. Aggregate seemed altogether accustomed as they took their positions on the iconic arched sofa, the admirers applauding agilely as the cameras began rolling. Ladies and gentlemen, amuse acceptable the man who actually wrote the book on authoritative deals. Donald Trump. Ross appear with his appropriate grin, his articulation accustomed that accustomed adumbration of atrocity that approved admirers knew so well. Trump coiled to the crowd, acutely adequate the reception, and acclimatized into his bench with the accessible aplomb of addition who had done bags of interviews. The babble began innocuously enough. Ross asked about Trump's contempo business ventures, his thoughts on the London acreage bazaar, and his adventures filming The Apprentice. Trump was in his element, regaling the admirers with belief about his assorted projects and bottomward names of celebrities he had formed with. The admirers laughed at his anecdotes, and Ross seemed absolutely entertained by his guests' aloft, then lactivity personality. "You know," Donald Ross said, aptitude advanced hardly with that beam in his eye that acclimatized allocution appearance watchers, accustomed as a arresting that things were about to get interesting. "I've been account about some of your business practices lately, and I accept to ask, do you any time feel like conceivably some of your methods are a bit, shall we say, ruthless?" The catechism afraid in the air for aloof a moment, and acute admirers' ability accept, noticed Trump's announcement about face about imperceptibly. His smile remained, but article harder flickered abaft his eyes. Ruthless. "Jonathan, I anticipate that's an actual arbitrary characterization. I'm a businessman. I accomplish deals. Sometimes bodies don't like the deals I accomplish because they're not as acceptable at authoritative deals as I am." Ross chuckled, but there was article acid in his follow-up. "But, absolutely, you can accept why some bodies' ability feel that way. Aback they apprehend about tenants actuality displaced, or baby contractors not actuality paid what they're owed. I mean, these are absolute people's lives we're talking about." The admirers grew quieter, analysis that this wasn't activity to be the accustomed animated celebrity babble they had expected. Trump's aspect straightened and his articulation took on a arresting edge. "Look, Jonathan, I anticipate you've been account to abundant affected news. The belief you're apropos to are absolutely absolute out of admeasurement by bodies who accept in calendar. Adjoin acknowledged businessmen like myself. Affected news." Ross aloft an eyebrow, his accent still playful but with an basal sharpness. "These are cloister documents, Donald. Legal proceedings. Are you adage the courts are affected news too?" Trump's face ablaze slightly, and he confused uncomfortably in his seat. "The courts can be wrong, Jonathan. They can be afflicted by politics, by bodies who don't appetite to see success. I've won far added cases than I've lost, and the ones I've absent were based on technicalities, not the truth. The restriction in the flat was acceptable, palpable. Ross, conceivably analysis, he had addled a nerve, absently to columnist further. But what about the contractors? The baby business owners who say they did assignment for you and didn't get paid. Are they all lying? Are they all allotment of some admirable cabal adjoined Donald Trump? You apperceive what? Jonathan Trump said, his articulation assent slightly. I don't like area, this is going. I came actuality to allocution about my book, to accept a affable conversation, not to be ambushed by addition who acutely has an agenda. Ross maintained his composure, but there was animate in his articulation now. I don't accept an agenda, Donald. I'm aloof allurement questions that I anticipate the admirers deserves answers to. Isn't that what journalism is about? This isn't journalism, Trump attempted back his acclaimed atmosphere alpha to show. This is a hit job. This is absolutely the affectionate of biased, arbitrary analysis that acknowledged bodies like me, except to accord with from the media establishment. The admirers was now absolutely silent. Watching this abrupt action unfold, Ross, to his credit, didn't back down. So, anyone who asks you difficult questions is biased. Anyone who holds you answerable is allotment of some enactment conspiracy. Trump stood up abruptly, his face red with anger. I don't accept to sit actuality and accept to this nonsense. I apprehension this was activity to be a able interview, not some abecedarian hour beforehand piece. Sit down, Donald, Ross said calmly, but there was ascendancy in his voice. You agreed to appear on the show. You can't aloof run abroad aback you don't like the questions. I can do whatever I want, Trump replied, his articulation alveolate through the now bashful studio. I'm Donald Trump. I don't charge to absolve myself to you or anyone abroad in this room. The action was a sent aloft annihilation the assembly aggregation had anticipated. Camera operators glanced nervously at their director, borderline whether to accumulate filming or cut away. The admirers sat frozen, witnessing what was acutely acceptable television history, admitting not the affectionate anyone had planned for. Ross remained seated, his accord complete admitting the atomic atmosphere that had engulfed his studio. Active abroad isn't activity to accomplish the questions disappear. Donald, the bodies watching at home deserve to apperceive who you absolutely are. Who I absolutely am. Trump's articulation absurd with indignation. I'll acquaint you who I absolutely am. I'm addition who has congenital and authority from nothing. I'm addition who has created bags of jobs and fabricated billions of dollars. I'm addition who doesn't charge to sit actuality and be lectured by some additional bulk allocution appearance host who allegedly makes in a year what I accomplish in a day. The claimed beforehand beatific a babble through the admirers and Ross's announcement accustomed noticeably. Additional rate, that's absorbing advancing from addition who's been broke assorted times. Acquaint me, Donald, aback you filed for bankruptcy. Did you anticipate about those baby contractors then? The ones whose money you acclimated to dig yourself out of your banking holes. Trump's face angry and alike added adumbration of red. That's business, Jonathan. That's how the absolute apple works. Aback you accomplish the kinds of deals I make. Sometimes things don't go absolutely as planned. But I consistently appear aback stronger. At whose expense, though? Ross apprenticed his announcer instincts, now absolutely engaged. You appear aback stronger, but what about the bodies you leave behind? The workers who don't get their final paychecks. The baby business owners who lose their companies because you absentively not to pay them. You don't apperceive what you're talking about, Trump snapped, pointing his felanon at Ross. You sit actuality in your adequate little flat allurement antic questions, but you've never congenital anything. You've never risked anything. You've never had the adventuresomeness to put aggregate on the band. For a deal, Ross leaned aback slightly, but his articulation remained steady. You're right, I haven't. But I additionally haven't larbored a isle of contributed bills and burst promises in my wake. I haven't had to avert myself in cloister dozens of times for not advantageous bodies what I owe them. Those cases were settled, Trump said through gritted teeth. Acclimatized favorably, high ability add. Settled, Ross afresh thoughtfully. Not one settled. Usually because it was cheaper to pay an atom of what you owed than to action it in cloister and accept all the capacity become accessible record. Trump took a footfall adjoin Ross, his easily clenched at his sides. You accept no abstraction what you're talking about. None whatsoever. Those settlements were cardinal business decisions fabricated by my lawyers. Strategic, Ross mused, appearing to flavor the word. Is that what you alarm it, aback you anneal to architect who's aggravating to augment his family? Strategic. I alarm it business, Trump attempt back. Article you acutely don't understand. In the absolute world, not anybody gets paid absolutely what they anticipate they deserve. That's capitalism. That's America. The admirers was absorbed by this exact battle. Abounding of them affairs out phones to almanac, what they aimlessly knew was an amazing moment. Ross noticed this and seemed to draw activity from their attention. But we're not in America appropriate now, are we, Donald? We're in Britain, area we tend to accept that a accord is a deal, and a man's chat is his bond. Old-fashioned concepts, I know, but we're absolutely addicted of them. Trump's beam was acrid and bitter. A man's chat is his bond. That's affluent advancing from a country that's been crumbling for decades. At Atomic in America, we still perceive how to win. The bellicism in Trump's acknowledgement seemed to bang a ambit with Ross, whose articulation took on a bluff edge. Declining. That's your appraisal of Britain, the country that's hosting you appropriate now, the country whose media your application to beforehand your book. I'm advertence facts, Trump replied, his chest aloof out with defiance. America is the greatest country in the world. We accept the best deals, the best business minds, the best everything. If Britain was accomplishing so well, why would you charge American businessmen like me to appearance you how it's done? Ross stood up slowly, analogous Trump's advancing posture. Appearance us how it's done. Is that what you alarm abrogation contractors contributed and tenants displaced? Is that the American way you appetite to advise us? The American way, Trump said, his articulation decrepit with condescension, is about winning. It's about actuality, able abundant to accomplish the boxy decisions that anemic bodies like you can't understand. Anemic bodies like me. Ross's accord was assuredly alpha to crack. Donald, I've been accomplishing this job for over 20 years. I've interviewed prime ministers, presidents, Nobel Prize winners, and captains of industry. And in all that time, I've never met anyone absolutely so atrocious to argue the apple of his own importance. Trump's aperture fell accessible slightly, acutely not assured such a absolute claimed attack. Desperate? You anticipate I'm desperate? I'm account billions of dollars. I accept barrio with my name on them all over the world. What do you have, Jonathan? What bequest are you abrogation behind? Hopefully, Ross replied quietly, an honest one. The simple acknowledgement seemed to hit Trump harder than all the antecedent exchanges combined. For a moment, the flat fell absolutely silent, the weight of those two words blind abundant in the air. Trump's voice, a backy baton again, was low and dangerous. You appetite to allocution about honesty? Let's allocution about honesty. You arrive me actuality below apocryphal pretenses. You told my bodies this was activity to be a affable account about my book and my business success. Instead, you've angry it into some affectionate of kangaroo cloister area you get to comedy adjudicator and jury. Ross befuddled his arch slowly. I arrive you actuality to accept a conversation. Absolute conversation. The affectionate area difficult questions get asked and honest answers get given. If you can't handle that, afresh conceivably, you shouldn't be accomplishing interviews at all. Don't acquaint me what I should or shouldn't be doing, Trump snarled. I've been giving interviews aback afore you were allegedly alike on television. I apperceive how this bold is played, and what you're accomplishing isn't arena fair. Ross's eyebrows attempt up. You appetite to allocution about fair? Is it fair aback a baby architect does assignment for you in acceptable acceptance, and A Fresh has to sue you to get paid? Is it fair aback alive families get evicted so you can about-face their apartments into affluence condos? Trump was about cavernous with rage. Now you accumulate bringing up these aforementioned annoyed examples. These abandoned incidents that accept been absolutely out of measurement by bodies with axes to grind. Abandoned incidents. Ross pulled out a binder from below his desk, one that had allegedly been able in advance. Donald, I accept a count actuality of over 200 lawsuits filed to join your companies for non-payment of services. 2. How's that isolated? Trump stared at the binder as if it were an antagonistic snake. His face went through an alternation of expressions from shock to acerbity to article that about looked like fear. Where did you get that? Public records, Donald Ross replied calmly, aperture the binder, and casual at the Aboriginal page. It's all accessible advice accessible to anyone who cares to look. He began a count from the document. Miller Construction, contributed amount $420,000. Rodriguez Electrical Services, contributed amount $87,000. Thompson Plumbing Solutions, contributed amount $115,000. Stop. Trump commanded, his articulation almost controlled. You stop appropriate now. But Ross continued, his articulation growing stronger with anniversary name. Henderson Painting Company, $62,000. Martinez Carpentry, $94,000. These aren't numbers on a spreadsheet, Donald. These are absolute bodies with absolute families who trusted you. Trump lunged forward, extensive for the folder, but Ross pulled it back. Accord me that. You accept no appropriate to those documents. I accept every right, Ross said firmly. This is journalism, Donald. This is captivation-able bodies answerable for their actions. Article you assume to accept abhorred for best of your career. Journalism. Trump's beam was acrid and manic. This is appearance assassination. This is a setup. You brought me actuality to abase me on civic television. I brought you actuality to accept an honest conversation, Ross replied. If the accuracy is based to you, that's not my fault. Trump began pacing aback and alternating abaft the couch, his easily gesturing wildly. The truth. You appetite the truth? The accuracy is that business is complicated. The accuracy is that sometimes affairs don't assignment out the way anybody hopes. The accuracy is that I've created added amount and added jobs than anybody in this flat combined. And the accuracy is additionally that you've larbored a lot of accident in your wake, Ross attempted back. A lot of burst promises and burst dreams. Aback does that alpha to amount to you, Donald? Trump chock-full pacing an apple to face Ross directly. It doesn't amount because it's not true. These bodies you're talking about, they knew what they were accepting into. They fabricated bad deals, and now they appetite to accusation me for their own incompetence. The aloofness in Trump's articulation seemed to shock alike some associates of the admirers who exchanged afflictive glances. Ross noticed this and absentively to columnist his advantage. Bad deals. Ross's articulation was incredulous. Donald, a plumber who installs pipes in your architecture and afresh doesn't get paid, didn't accomplish a bad deal. He got cheated. He fabricated a cord with addition who wasn't as acute as me, Trump replied, his airs now absolutely unmasked. That's his mistake, not mine. The flat fell bashful again, but this time the blackout acquainted different. It acquainted abundant with acumen and disapproval. Alike, Trump seemed to apprehend that his aftermost animadversion had beyond a line, but instead of abetment down, he angled down. That's how business works, he continued, admitting his articulation lacked some of its beforehand conviction. The able survive and the anemic get larboard behind. It's a customed alternative in the marketplace. Ross befuddled his arch slowly, attractive, absolutely disgusted. Accustomed selection. These are animal beings we're talking about, not animals angry for survival. These are alive bodies. Aggravating to accomplish an honest active, and I'm aggravating to body an empire. Trump snapped. Sometimes those two things are incompatible. So you accept the authority over the bodies every time. I accept acceptable over accident every time, Trump replied afterwards hesitation. Ross looked out at the audience, abounding of whom were afraid they're active in disbelief. Ladies and gentlemen, you've aloof heard it beeline from Donald Trump's mouth. Aback faced with the best amid advantageous alive bodies what he owes them and padding his own profits. He chooses profits every distinct time. "You're a G, my words," Trump protested. But his articulate anemic now, defensive. "I'm repeating your words," Ross corrected. "Your exact words. You aloof told an admirers of alive bodies that their livelihoods don't amount as abundant as your empire." Trump looked about the studio, aback, appearing to apprehend that he had absent the allowance completely. The admirers that had acclaimed him agilely at the alpha of the appearance was now staring at him with expressions alignment from disappointment to absolute hostility. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, afresh aloft his articulation again. "This accomplished affair is ridiculous. I don't charge this. I don't charge to sit actuality and be lectured by addition, who has never congenital anything, never risked anything, never accomplished annihilation abutting to what I've achieved." "What you've achieved," Ross said quietly, "it is the acceptability as addition who can't be trusted to accumulate his word. What you've accomplished is a bequest of burst promises and contributed bills. Is that absolutely what you appetite to be remembered for?" Trump's acknowledgement was actual and explosive. "I appetite to be remembered as a winner, as addition who never backed bottomward from a action and never accustomed annihilation beneath than absolute victory. And I absolutely don't appetite to be remembered as addition who let himself get pushed about by some has been British allocution appearance host." The claimed insult afraid in the air like a challenge. Ross stood up slowly, his face flushed, but his articulation steady. "Hasp been Donald. At atomic aback I accord addition my word. I accumulate it. At atomic aback I accomplish a promise. Bodies can calculation on it. Can you say the same?" Trump stared at Ross for a continued moment, his chest ascent and falling rapidly. Aback he spoke. His articulation was almost aloft a whisper, but it agitated acutely through the bashful studio. "I've had abundant of this." "Except you?" Ross asked. "Because I accept a few added questions about your business practices, about your tax returns, about your accommodating donations that assume to abandon into attenuate air." "No," Trump said, afraid his arch vigorously. "No added questions. No added of this witch hunt. I'm done." He began walking adjoin the bend of the set, but Ross alleged afterwards him. "Walking abroad doesn't accomplish the questions disappear. The accuracy has a way of afterward bodies around." Trump chock-full and angry aback one final time, his face angled with rage. "The truth. You appetite to apperceive the truth. The accuracy is that you're nothing. This appearance is nothing. This accomplished country is annihilation compared to what I've built. And any time aback I'm active for president, I'll bethink this babble and all the bodies who doubted me." With that, he ripped off his microphone, threw it on the floor, and stormed off the set. The complete of his footsteps echoed through the abashed flat as the admirers sat in complete silence, processing what they had aloof witnessed. Ross remained standing, watching Trump's avenue with an admixture of achievement and 18-carat sadness. He angry to the camera and batting on to the admirers at home. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was Donald Trump assuming us absolutely who he is aback the cameras are rolling and the questions get tough. The action was over, but the impulse of what had aloof happened was alone alpha to bore in for anybody who had witnessed it. That's the adventure of one of the best atomic allocution appearance moments in television history. The night aback, two actual altered men collided over axiological questions of honesty, integrity, and what it agency to be successful. What do you anticipate absolutely pushed Trump over the edge? Was it the binder of lawsuits, the claimed attacks, or article deeper? Hit that subscribe button if you appetite to see added absurd behind-the-scenes belief like this one. And let me apperceive in the comments what you anticipate Trump should accept done abnormally in this situation.